Hello, today I'd like to talk about the game Demon's Run from Yaquinto in 1981. It's one of their album games. They're called album games because they are the size of, record albums. Very nice cover art. A ship going near a black hole, and there's several different black holes around there. Then the back, 2 to 4 players, although you can play it one player. It's not the simplest game, but it's of, moderate complexity. The way the album game works then is that it has an insert, and in this insert, in these side pockets, you can actually, you can store the counters. The box, after you take the insert out, becomes the board. The concept is that there's 4 ships that are racing, and they come in from different corners of the board, and there's different obstacles, and the ships have offensive and defensive capability, and these ships need to win. They recover buoys, B-O-U-Ys, in here, and complete the kind of the circuit there. So it's got a little bit of background story to give you a theme. Tri-D broadcast of the 43rd cycle Star Cup Challenge Racing Series, Demon's Run. In the Tri-D image, the ship, a tiny gossamer structure of polished high-tech chrome iridium stress web filigree, hung above the turbulent maelstrom of Hell 3 below. Tiny bursts of intense white flashed around the periphery of the ship from the maneuver pods. The story here is nice, gives you a little bit of flavor of being in the race. So as far as the components, there's the rule book, which typical of Yaquinto, even for more simple games, they tend to have a lot of rules. 16 pages. The map, so the board folds out to be the map. All the information you need for the game is on the board. So up here you have various information about movement and the various actions you can do. So that's really handy. You have a turn tracker here. And down here, this is for randomize the order of the player movement, various obstacles, and etc. So the board's nice. Each of the 4 ships has a card which track the information. These are statistics for each of the ships. The F is fuel, so that tracks your fuel. SI is your hull, your structural integrity. PI is pilot integration with the ship, so kind of like the interface. ME is the main engine. This is the maneuvering engine. This is the tractor beam. Laser. Scrambler, which is a way of messing with the sensors of your opponents. Screens, which is a defensive screen, and this is the velocity that you track. So they're simple but functional. To track, where you're at in these, you use these little green chits to mark where the different levels are, and that's how you kind of keep track of your ship status. Very simple. It's cardstock. It's okay. And the counters themselves are shown here. These green markers are to track on the system status sheets of your ships. These are initiative markers, and they're basically to help randomize who goes first. In the game, you're collecting these buoys during the run to get points, and these are ones that move. These are moving buoys. These are ones that are stationary. These are buoys that are around, kind of the maelstrom, like the kind of the black hole kind of thing on the board. These are mines that are on the board. And then there's 4 players, and these different colors represent the players. These are the ships, the 4 different ships. These are placement markers, which I'll show how those are used on the board. And these are some other, here's a turn marker, these are action markers. They're thick, so they're easy to handle, and I do like that. The game doesn't come with dice. There are some other album games that do, but I haven't found that this one does. So as a game scale, each ship counter is 1 ship, and it's a hex board, and across a hex is 100 kilometers, and each game turn is 3 minutes of real time. On the board, there's black holes that go in different directions of rotation. There's, radiation zones. There's null zones that affect, vehicle performance. And there's, like I said, there's buoys that stay in place. There's ones that move. There's ones in, the black hole areas, mines, gameplay sequence. And so there's pre-movement where for the free floaters, you dice for move that. The high rollers, which we'll talk about. The initiative, so you determine the order of movement. The players allocate their ship functions. And then for the moving players, laser and scrambler attacks, escape attempts, a null escape attempt, hellhole escape attempts, ship movement, and then you repeat for the other players. Laser and scramble attack, when you have a ship oriented in that direction, it's a 60-degree arc, and the distance effects of that. How do you track damage on your ship? Basically, when you get various critical hits, you reduce the markers on your various functions. Victory, points you get for buoys, for the speed at which you do it. Setting up the game board is pretty straightforward. So there's these positions A, B, C, D, and I'm choosing for this scenario to do 3 players where I'm doing it solitaire, where it's myself against 2 other ships. And I'll just kind of shift frame of reference when I do those. But so the ships, there's a ship, and then these are placement markers. So basically, it's a way to you move your ship, and then you keep that in your previous position as a marker of where you were previous, in case you find you made a mistake. So that's just kind of a one-step kind of memory thing, which is kind of interesting. Turn marker, and then everything else is placed on the board according to where the markers are. So here's a stationary buoy, and there's a stationary buoy initial location position, a floating buoy in a floating buoy position, a mine, or also called hellhound, which is in that marker. I'm not sure why it's red instead of yellow. And these are hell buoys, and putting the appropriate spots. So here, and here. But setup of the board, and then of the ship design. So each person is allowed 80 points to allocate. And for each of the steps you go up, it's 1 point, except for the pilot integration, which is 3 points for each step. So since you go up 2 here, that'd be 6. And you don't have to allocate for velocity, because that's a function of what the engines do. So for myself, I set it up here. So this is 160 units. So since it goes in 10 increments for the boxes here, that'd be 16 points for this. And it steps up 1 here, so that's 20 points for the structural, the hull, structural integrity. Pilot integration, 6. Main engine, step up the number of boxes, so that'd be 6. Maneuvering engine, step up 6 boxes, 6 points. Tractor beam, 10. Laser, 4. And then for the scrambler, it'd be 6, and screen is 6. And then for these, I changed them up a little bit. I basically moved the laser up 1 and the tractor down 1 for each of these, so they each get a sum of 80. So I'm a few turns into it here. I'll talk about how the play's been going. The ship has been moving, the different ships have been moving, and you give power to your main engines. You either accelerate or decelerate, and you mark it here. And then based on if you're accelerating or decelerating, you adjust your resulting velocity based on that. If you're accelerating at 2, then you would step your velocity up 2 points. So it's way of capturing the actual physics. And if you don't do it right, you will overshoot, your buoy target. So you have to be careful how to accelerate and decelerate. And that also allows you to do, turning here. So when you do accelerating, then you lose fuel. I mean, that's pretty dynamic as far as, in a lot of games you have choices of moving, less than maximum, but here you're driven by, the physics. So you have to kind of target your buoy and not try to, overshoot it. And you have to be careful not to get into these ionizing storms or to get, around the energy bucket, the energy of the black hole. Because if you get caught in here, you're going to start, spinning around. And keep accelerating. You have to expend velocity to get out. So it's interesting how black holes are mapped here. And similarly too with the buoys, when they get caught in the maelstrom of the black hole, they go around, and then you roll a dice to indicate how far they're moving around in the direction of the black hole. And then if you get out, so to move either the mines, which are also called hellhounds, or the floating buoys, you roll a 1 to 3, they move, and 4 to 6, they don't. If they do move, then you roll another 6-sided to show which direction they move in one hex. And then these nulls, so if you get into a null, there's a chance you can't move anymore. You roll out one 6-sided dice. And the rules are a little bit ambiguous as far as what you need, but I assume it's a 1 to 3, 4 to 6. 4 to 6 to get out, and that's kind of implied by the rules. Stuff gets in, stuff randomly gets in the black hole, they go around, and they're clustered kind of tightly here, so you have to be careful. So it's tricky, you have to be careful not to overshoot your target, and then when you get within range of your target, the more you put energy to your tractor beams, and the closer you are, and the less dynamic you are as far as stuff is a maelstrom, etc. Those are modifiers to determine how likely you are to be able to capture that in the tractor beam. And then if you get an ionizing storm, you can potentially take damage as well. And you can fire lasers at opposing ships, etc. And then to take damage, you roll dice to see if a critical hit was made. And this chart. So you see roll 2 6-sided to see if there's a critical hit. Some of those will be system crises, which you also roll to see if you stop. So it gets to be very dynamic. You got a lot of stuff moving around. Your ships have to figure out the mechanics of getting there. Stationary is a little more straightforward, obviously, than moving buoys, because you have to line things up, avoid ion storms and null points to get where you gotta go. And all the while, you also have to make sure you're not decreasing your fuel. So some of the systems require fuel, like for every acceleration of the main engine, expends 2 fuel levels. Same with deceleration. When you do turning on a hex, it's 1. Screen level expends 1. Tractor level is 1. And laser level is 1. The scrambler, and that's attack you can do against other ships, so that their screens go down, and that requires 2 fuel levels. So each turn you figure out how you're allocating here, and then you decrease your fuel levels, you increase your velocities. For each turn then you allocate what functions you want. And my assumption was that for fuel you don't expend energy, and I also was assuming for the structural integrity you don't expend energy. And also it says for maneuvering engines you don't expend energy, but I was assuming that for everything else you do. With that interpretation then from these rules, it looks like you have 18 points to allocate, and that was my judgment, based on the example. But there is a little bit of ambiguity in the rules, but I think you can kind of figure it out from examples. It's interesting how dynamic it is. It moves pretty fast. I like how it does the tracking of acceleration, deceleration, and then you have to get your target without overshooting. So there's a lot of kind of dynamics to think about there. And meanwhile, the other ships are also moving around. And then you have to look out for mines, because if you get within 2 hexes of a mine, it can do damage to you. So you have to look out for that as well. So that's kind of a summary of how it works. And then so when you take hits, some of the critical hits will go to your structural integrity. And then when your structural integrity goes to 0, the ship is destroyed. But then also when your fuel goes away, you can't move. If your engines are damaged to 0, you also can't move. So there's cases where you're disabled, and then there's cases where your ship is actually destroyed. And I just went a few turns in, but I did collect 1 buoy. So each time you collect a buoy, you get it, and that'll go to your victory conditions. Overall, it's a very enjoyable game. A lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of combat, but there's a lot combating nature because I mean I like how they do the black holes. How it kind of accelerates you going around. You need energy to get out, and then these other items, ion storms. It's kind of interesting how it's kind of a race, battle against nature. So that's kind of neat, kind of a unique aspect of the game. And I like that you have to think about, physics and a little bit, acceleration, deceleration as it applies to velocity as well. Since there's randomness in where things go, where they're going around, the black holes, that adds replayability to the game, which is nice. It's a very enjoyable game. I'd give it a 7.